one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
City Manager, the report from the closed session, would you like to give that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Harrington, members of the council. We met with council in closed session on labor negotiations and received direction. Thank you.
And I skipped over the roll call, so we get a roll call, please.
Councilmember Hundley,
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Here.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Was a spider?
here, Councilmember Cook,
Here.
Mayor Harrington.
Present.
Thank you.
We already had the report on the closed session. If anybody has, next item is approval of the agenda. If anyone has any changes to the agenda, please make it now. Otherwise, can we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
A roll call?
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Now on to public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating and spelling your name and giving your address.
Ken Brown, BROWN. I have the honor this week on the Hey Neighbor Show, KSVY, 2 to 4 on Wednesday, to have the mayor, Amy Harrington, come on the show and talk about all the wonderful things that the city manager left out last week. So we have an even better guest the following week, her dad.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
My name is Dave Jefferson, Jefferson. I'm the managing director of a group that acquired 865, 875 West Napa Street 2 years ago. While a dilapidated commercial property sorely needing renovation, we will commence construction as soon as the building permit is issued. However, it is properly zoned for a storefront dispensary and includes almost 50 parking spaces, a significant attribute for expected high-traffic dispensary. While currently vacant, we have not yet placed on the rental market pending its renovation. Nevertheless, I've been working with a successful dispensary operator till this past week when they decided the current ambiguities, uncertainties, and financial risks of the city's proposal requirements were simply excessive. They characterized the changing and current requirements as intolerable and unrealistic. This perception by an experienced storefront operator may also prove typical of other knowledgeable applicants.
Sir, this is actually an item on tonight's agenda. So if you have a comment on an item not on the agenda, is it on tonight? Yeah.
Oh, I
Usually you address the item when it's called, if it's on the agenda, and public comment is for items that are not on the agenda.
Good. I will.
So you may want to save those comments for that time.
I will hold off then.
Okay, sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Look forward to hearing your comments at that time. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Okay. Our next item, is meeting dedications. Are there any dedications for this meeting? Okay. We now have a presentation, introduction of youth engagement seminar participants, and I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Harrington. And members of the council, delighted to be here again at the end of June for our third Youth Engagement Seminar program. This is a program that arose out of, frankly, Mayor Harrington's idea of creating a youth commission about 2 years ago, shortly after she joined the council, and there was a lot of conversation about different things to occur, and one of the items that evolved was this youth engagement seminar, kind of a 2-week youth leadership government 101. And so we do this in partnership with Sonoma Valley High School, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Sonoma Valley Education Foundation. And we've had 20 to 30 kids for the last 2 years go through this program, and I think this is the third class. So I'd like to invite Wendy Swanson up from Sonoma Valley High School to introduce the youth that are here. They're just starting. This is their first day. And I think the really exciting thing about this program also is that they're going to be joining us at our town hall meeting, and they're going to have their own tables to so we're going to have a great youth voice. Looking forward to that. So Wendy, if you want to come up with your youth engagement participants, and welcome.
Hello, council members. Again, as the city manager said, this is the third annual youth engagement seminar. We have about 17, 18 kids this time. We have an equal number of girls and boys. I'm not going to make any assumptions about the fact that only the girls are here tonight. But the boys, a lot of the boys had things going on. One of it's his birthday and all kinds of things. So, and again, because it's our first night, they are just getting started. Some of them had other plans, and we don't have our cool shirts that the Ed Foundation buys for them yet. They're coming tomorrow. So anyways, one of the things we worked on today is public speaking and introducing ourselves, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leslie Onnes, and I am one of the students in the Yes Engagement Seminar. I am going to be a sophomore, so right now kind of consider myself a freshman since school hasn't really started, but I'm an incoming sophomore.
Hello, my name is Jimena Echeverria. I'm 14 years old, and I will be a sophomore next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Elena Paraponyaris, and like my peers here, I am also an incoming sophomore. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peyton Crawford, and I will be an incoming freshman, and I am 14 years old. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sinette. Hello, my name is Sinette Velasquez, and I'm 16 years old, and I will be a senior next year at Sonoma Valley High School.
Hello, I am Yanel Velasquez, and I will be coming in sophomore next year.
Hello, I'm Andrea Zavala-Veza, and I'll be an incoming sophomore as well.
Wonderful. I know we'll take a picture later with these guys, but could we, these ladies, could we take a photo now? No. Great. Girls, do you want to come up?
These chairs are very complicated.
They're very complicated. So many features. We should have a whole council meeting just
Well, you're good. One, two, three. 2, 3. Perfect.
Can I just add one thing? Last year when you were all running for election, I know a couple of you were, it was the Yes students from last year who put together a debate at the high school that I know Councilmember Harvey was at, and a lot of his opponents. You were there too. And anyways.
Our opponent.
True. And Councilmember Agrimonti has asked one of our alums from last year to serve on the bus meeting for getting the free fare, and we actually had input into the timetables and stuff. So they're making their way into, involvement in the city.
That's great.
Thanks.
That's wonderful. I just want to say how happy we are that you're here, and all of us are just excited for you to find out if you're interested in government or if you like it, and to learn a little bit more. And we look forward to supporting you, not only as participants, but in the future, getting to know you, letters of recommendation for college. We consider you, part of our city team, and we're so delighted that you are part of this program and that you put yourself out there to try out something which I can only assume is new since you're rising sophomores. It's really very exciting to have you here, and look forward to seeing you at City Hall this coming week. Anyone else? And with that, on to the next item. Okay. And now we'll have an update on Sonoma County Emergency Services by Chris Godley, the Sonoma County Emergency Services Director.
And maybe, Chris, can I just briefly give Chris some kudos? I want to thank council for the opportunity to invite Chris here and give you an overview. Chris has been doing a great job, and there's a lot of partnership and communication happening between city staff and the county staff. So look forward to having him provide you and the community with an update.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, we're still working on technology. Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Again, Christopher Godley. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for the county's new Department of Emergency Management. The department was officially created in March. I actually came on board last December, Christmas Eve. So 6 months into it, I was asked to help provide an update of where the department is and where we're going. And certainly, I believe that I'll throw out a few topics that might enjoin some questions. So I hope that if you would like to have a discussion, I'm more than happy to do that. But very briefly, just some of the highlights as we get through it.
Hey, Chris, just one thing. Can you speak closer to the microphone? Just your voice is a little softer. I want to make sure it carries for folks. Thank you.
We'll do that. All right. So very briefly, I thought that we could cover a few discussion points that might be of interest. Of course, the new county department, exciting as ever in bureaucracy to have a new department, but focusing very quickly then on alert and warning, evacuation planning, community preparedness, and of course, our new popular topic, electrical de-energization. Okay. So the new department was established in March officially with the budget adoption. We've come from about 4 staff and $840,000 a year to 12 staff at $2.4 million a year. So we're the only county department at this time that's actually adding staff. As you're aware, the county departments are in cutbacks at this point with the budget that was adopted last Friday. That increased staffing is designed to facilitate several different functions. The first is to facilitate a more direct and sustainable engagement with our communities, both in preparedness prior to an event, as well as during response to an event. So some of the things that we've implemented, for example, are a 24/7 staff duty officer position, so that if a local city manager or a public safety chief needed to contact the emergency management office, they no longer have to hunt and peck. They can just call one phone number, or a dispatch can do it for them, and they can plug right into us. We also conduct weekly briefings that are available for our stakeholders, cities, special districts, stakeholder organizations. We convene a Monday morning conference call where we update people on recent events as well as what's coming our way, especially when we start looking at potentially hazardous situations with weather. We've implemented a city liaison officer position in our emergency operations center. So the city manager, if our normal methods and procedures for communicating during a disaster event aren't working, if there's a systematic issue, there's a dedicated hotline almost for city managers to make use of during those events. Just to highlight, I would actually go back one slide very briefly if I could. Thank you. And I'll try it now with my remote. This is a diagram of the new County Department of Emergency Management. It highlights the 12 positions by titles, but very briefly, just to highlight, we have 4 major functional areas. The first is emergency management, planning, training, and exercising for disaster events. This is where we expect to support and incorporate more coordination with the city of Sonoma during planning events. We're going to modify our emergency operations plan late this year to better reflect the city's role, not just in serving its own residents, but also serving the larger unincorporated areas that surround the city and those residents that come to the city for assistance. That planning and training exercise function will also extend to the city, in that we're going to be offering training courses that are uniform, if you would, standardized throughout the county. So staff from cities, other jurisdictions can also participate along with county staff during these training and exercise events. In terms of our engagement, we do have a community preparedness manager now on board. Dr. Nancy Brown is with me this evening. Her job is to, if you would, facilitate the process by which we build a culture of preparedness in Sonoma County. Not necessarily going out and making presentations, but really engaging the community to identify which target populations we need to address, and then identifying the social networks that are already in place and bringing disaster preparedness into those networks and kind of creating more of a conversation of disaster preparedness as kind of just who we are in Sonoma County. We'll also have a public information officer to help us prepare for and especially respond to disaster events. And then we have a community alert and warning program manager. As I'll address later, we're going to be significantly investing in our capacity to support the emergency alert and warning capabilities for all the residents throughout Sonoma County. And then finally, administrative services. We're very excited to actually have staff that can help us kind of stay on top of things in terms of maintaining emergency contact rosters or processing Homeland Security grants so that we can go after additional funding more than what we currently receive. So as you can see, it's 4 major functions. It's a big build out on a per capita basis. This is the largest investment in emergency management of any county in the state of California. And we really hope to be able to deliver by the end of this calendar year on all the promises we've made in developing that program. Next up is alert and warning. Quite a few accomplishments, of course, since the October fires. Working groups. We ran a big exercise last September where we validated and found our challenges with the technology we use for alert and warning, like the wireless emergency alert system. High-low sirens have now been installed on all the sheriff's cars, including those that support the city of Sonoma. That's that European ambulance tone, the na-na-na-na. That'll become a Vine, okay.
Could you do that again for us? What was that?
I'll bring one out to the parking lot. But we wanted to be able to, as a first step, really capture the low-hanging fruit in expanding the range and methods by which we alert and warn our communities. There is no silver bullet. No one technology is going to do everything for us. So our goal is to build, if you would, an entire encyclopedia of systems that we can employ probably universally and at the same time so that 2 or 3 or 4 of those will get through to the people that need to have that alert or warning message delivered. I will mention fire cameras have been installed. This allows dispatchers to more easily track down fires, find out where they're at, how they're moving, how they're performing. That allows us to zero in much quicker and get those resources onto the fire as quickly as possible. It also helps inform our alert and warning so that we know if the fire's going in a certain direction earlier, we can do our alert and warning earlier as well. I'll mention that we're making a significant investment in also conducting all of this in Spanish as well as English. And in March of this year, actually February of this year, we conducted all of our Russian River flood warnings in English and in Spanish, as well as all of our public information messaging was completely and equally duplicated in both English and Spanish, not just in terms of translation, but also interpretation. And we had we had people that were culturally affiliated and could make the appropriate choice of language and communicating with the Spanish language community as opposed to just translating from English to Spanish. And then I do mention we have the new alert and warning program manager on board. He's one of 4 in the state of California, so we're very excited to have the capacity to expand not just the use of technologies, but community engagement as well. And in terms of next steps, there's quite a bit coming up. Just very briefly, we will be doing another community alert and warning exercise in August of this year. We're maximizing the use of the NOAA weather radio system. On Mount Sonoma, we installed a radio transmitter after the fires. It now reaches everybody in the valley. And we can use that NOAA weather radio later this year to actually carry alert and warning messages. And the NOAA weather radios can actually be set to monitor, so people in their homes can just set it and forget it. And if there is an alert, the radio actually turns itself on with an alert and warning system, or a siren if you would, and then people can hear the message being broadcast at that time. And of course, sirens. We are looking at sirens. We do have a pending grant with the Federal Emergency Management Agency that would fund the potential for installing sirens for selected areas in Sonoma County for emergency warning systems. I'm going fast. If anything on alert and warning? Any questions?
Yeah, so my question would be for the NOAA weather radio system. Is that going to be able to work in areas where cell phones and things like that don't? That's kind of the purpose of that system.
That is really our intent. We are going to be validating some of the reception capabilities that signal, but we've mapped it that it reaches most every nook and cranny in the valley at this point. We feel pretty good about its reach. It's much better signal than you're going to get with cell phone, and especially on the east side of the valley.
And can it not only turn on but adjust volume as well?
You can adjust the volume when you set your radio. That is correct. But
No, but can you guys, when you send the alert, like if I have my volume down on it and there's like a fire coming?
we will send you an alert, and we'll trigger the alert with an actual warning tone. So you'll hear a very high-pitched, I can bring it out of my bag if you really want to hear it, but it's a very high-pitched, warbling tone. You won't miss it at all.
Okay.
And then you'll know to go to radio at that point. We also like the radio because we can attach accessories to it that will serve many more portions of our community. For example, the deaf and hard of hearing, we can attach both visual strobe lights, and then we can attach an auditory or vibratory device that you can place on the bed, and it'll vibrate when the radio goes off with a warning message. And I can certainly pass those around if you like, but it really enables people that can't access our other technologies another avenue for getting that message.
Do you mind if I ask? Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it. How much would that cost, that radio?
That radio's, the cheapest version's about $17, and then you can buy $40, $50 radios as well. You leave them plugged in, you set it, you forget it, and it goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning and scares the heck out of you, and then you can hear the message. We're hoping to be the first county in the nation to use this system in a test case later this year.
I have a question. Thank you for your report. When people hear the siren, what is the direction? What are they supposed to do?
So at this point, that's really the challenge. It's not just buying the technology and putting a siren on a pole. It's really part of that larger community education that has to go along with it. Everybody that lives in that area has to understand that the siren is really just an alerting device.
Mm-hmm.
It's not intended to trigger an actual response or a behavior. It doesn't mean immediately evacuate. It means that there's something going on. You need to pay attention, tune into the media, turn on the weather radio, check socoemergency.org, find out what's happening. Because it might be a tanker spill on Highway 12, and we might be wanting people to shelter in place. The last thing we want them to do is jump out of their houses and into the roadways. So we're treating sirens as an alerting system only. It doesn't really
It's like an alert to check
behavior.
other media.
It does.
Oh, okay.
And most people won't take action anyways until they corroborate the information they're receiving with 2 or 3 other sources. So
Yeah, I was thinking like with air raid sirens, there was extensive training about what you're supposed to do. So we're playing the same siren, but it's not clear.
Well, it depends on what part of the country you go to when these sirens go off. In Tornado Alley, it means go from the outside to the inside, for example. And in the southeast United States, for hurricanes, they want people to actually evacuate and leave low-lying areas. So a large part of sirens is the community education piece. And I'll share with you, we're looking at sirens for not just wildfire, but potentially dam failure or even tsunami on the coastline.
Councilmember Hundley. Thank you.
Yeah, just a note on the NOAA weather alert systems. I think they're amazing. I grew up in Alabama partially, and we had tornadoes. South Carolina, we had hurricanes, and we had this little device that just lived at our house, and every now and then it would either test itself or it would start making a bunch of noise and give us a lot of information. It's amazing. However, I think to get enough people here to buy into it, I think that it's going to have to be some program where people can get them for free. So
well,
is there?
Now that you mention it, we have applied for grant funding so we could buy devices and the accessories for our most vulnerable populations, and potentially distribute them via those social networks I talked about, the trusted social organizations that people belong to. We'd be looking to use those as the avenue for distribution. But we are really going to be targeting our most vulnerable populations first.
Definitely, and I think for the people who can afford it, it's just I think it's going to take a lot of effort for everyone to even be aware that this is a helpful thing. So that's a huge hurdle, but from personal experience, it's extremely useful because it just tells you, and it's very alarming when it goes off.
That's true.
One With regard to community information and things like that, are there going to be efforts on the part of county emergency services to fight disinformation? Because during the fires, there was a lot of kind of incorrect information that floated around. Or is you just expecting people to go find those resources and then bring it back?
That's a great question, because apparently you can't trust everything you read on the internet. That's a thing.
Shock.
It is.
Just most of it.
Most of it. I will share that we now believe that public information is a critical mission area during a response to a disaster event. What used to be kind of a secondary value, we'll have a press conference tomorrow and we'll put out a press release every once in a while, is now evolved into a real-world, meaningful, real-time conversation with our residents. And so to that end, we've made a few changes. We've invested more heavily in the public information capabilities we have. Technology, for example, our current website, socoemergency.org, and I'll have that up in a moment, is the first website that the county owns that is now not a county domain. That means we actually went to the private sector and said, hey, we need your help with what we call a dynamically scaling website, which means 50,000 people can access it at the same time and it won't crash. That's a great idea. We can host more transient information like real-time mapping, for example, we used during the floods this year. We also now link it to alert and warning systems. So when I ever issue an alert or warning via the wireless emergency alert system on your phone, that same alert message is automatically uploaded to socoemergency.org in both English and in Spanish. So people can see that message. If they didn't catch it, they can now see it on their phones or their computers in both English and in Spanish. And then I'll also mention we've expanded the role of the public information officer in our emergency response function. We've taken the public information officer team, which was a small team kind of buried in the management section, and we've expanded our traditional incident command system structure to include public information as its own animal. It's really growing from 4 or 5 staff to about 15 at this point, pretty much because of the social media conversations that have to go. So when we talk about rumor control, yes, we put out information that's mostly correct. We don't wait anymore for approval or to make everything perfect. We put out corrections, and then we jump on things that we see are in error.
Great. Councilmember Hundley.
Do you have more presentation? I can wait till the end.
Sure.
You might get to what I'm going to ask about. So
I know I'll mention evacuation planning is of significant interest in Sonoma County due to our experience a year and a half ago. Our plan at this point is to develop resident evacuation guides for target communities. We've taken the unincorporated areas of the county so far, and we've identified and basically delineated evacuation zones, small neighborhoods, kind of pockets of humanity, if you would, that kind of self-identify as a community, or they're physically isolated, or maybe there's only one roadway serving them. And so for each of these communities, we want to go meet with the social group that already is present, the social network that's in that community. It might be a homeowners association or other group, and develop an evacuation guide that provides information in one piece of paper, front and back, to people. How would I be warned if I live in this canyon? What kind of warning systems are going to reach me? What kind of information, what kind of things should I take with me if I have to evacuate? What should I pack? And then also, what are the evacuation routes for my community? What's the easy way in? Is there a second alternate route? Or if there is no other route, is there a safe refuge point where I can go to? And so the goal then is to socialize out the community, have them comment on it, tell us what's right, what's wrong, and then go back to the community after we've distributed that final guide and evacuate them. Actually run an evacuation drill. Go up one Saturday morning, take the high-low sirens on the sheriff's car, and have everybody drive down the hill. So we socialize and build some muscle memory into these evacuation procedures as well. And so we're starting that this month. We'll start doing our drills next month. We're targeting our top 24 communities that have evacuation challenges. Probably won't get them all done this summer, but we're going to get the ball rolling. Anything on evacuation?
Do you have a list of what those communities are?
Not quite yet. I have a list that I have to negotiate with some public safety chiefs this week. But
okay.
Yeah.
Do we know for the valley?
It's your east side. I think there's a map right there.
Oh, okay.
Showing the evacuation zones for the valley.
Does bright pink mean evacuation zone?
All those are evacuation zones. The more intense the color means, the greater the number of evacuation challenges that we believe that community may face. It may be because of a limited road network, or a higher number of people on a smaller road network, or they've had fire history in the past and they have high vegetation fuels right now. So we did a number of criteria in trying to evaluate which of these evacuation community zones have the most significant challenges. And so for the Valley, this is kind of what it looks like.
Thank you. Councilmember Hundley.
So this is what I was going to ask about. So the zones make sense. However, back during our fires, we ended up having a lot of voluntary evacuations because we were very concerned about the volume of people in the valley.
Yes.
And when you add that many people plus Sonoma plus our tiny roads, it just gets clogged. So when I was watching the campfire last year, it was terrifying because here was an area that had plans and practiced it, and it was insufficient. And here specifically, and I get questions about this a lot, I can understand why some areas might be even more challenging, but as far as the logistics of the sheer volume of people all trying to evacuate at the exact same time and the inevitable issues, if anyone that was even trying to voluntarily evacuate was stuck on 116 for a very long time. So how is this going to make how are people going to feel better that this is going to be worked out?
There is no silver bullet here. We don't have a road network that can support our entire population moving at the same time. And you mix in people that are unfamiliar with the area, tourists and such, it becomes a real challenge. So there are some shortcuts, workarounds. One is public education. If you believe you're at risk and there's fire on the hill, get out. Don't wait for the government to call you and tell you to leave. So, and we're also going to be evacuating people earlier. They're going to have to understand that we may overreact. We may overwarn them. We may over-evacuate them because we don't have the luxury of waiting to see where the fire is going to go until the last minute. We want to put people on the roads as early as possible to distribute that crush, if you would. So that's one of our workarounds. Another significant workaround for us is going to have to be the fact that when people move into these areas, they're going to have to take a lot more ownership for identifying how and when they're going to leave. I mentioned earlier, and it happened during the fires in 17, people were waiting for that phone call to evacuate. And then when they finally evacuated, they just got in a big long line with everybody else. That's what happened in Paradise. There was too much faith in the government's planning efforts for evacuation, and the conditions overwhelmed the assumptions that were made when that plan was developed. We think we know what we need to do in Sonoma Valley, but I'm here to tell you the fire behavior that we're seeing now is so much different than we've seen in the last 20 years. I don't expect, and that's why we're not developing community evacuation plans, a whole valley. We just can't do it. The answer is get out early, get out often, and yes, you go home and you're frustrated, you missed a night's sleep, but get to the road early is basically going to be part of our public education message. It's going to be a challenge. People don't want to do that.
Well, so I would say that that makes sense. However, when this happens, everyone's only going to find out what they know from the government, and everyone's going to be leaving all at once. So I realize it's not realistic, but it's either 50,000 people get trapped in the valley or everyone figures out what needs to happen. And so some sort of plan, what is the exit strategy? Because if the plan is 50,000 people need to leave the valley between very narrow roads, it has to happen.
So we are going to stage the evacuation warnings. We're not going to evacuate. We're not going to send warnings to the entire valley at the same time. Whoever's closest and greatest risk, they get the notice first. Then we wait a couple hours or an hour or two, and then the next batch of folks get that notice to get out as well. So we can try to stagger, if you would, the evacuation phases. That's why we've broken the county up into such small zones. It's not just the east side of the valley and the west side of the valley. We want to get as granular as we can, but of course we can expand this, combine those areas if necessary. It's not going to be pretty. People need to know they can't take 2 cars. Take 1 car. That's part of the public education. Yes, you have to leave the Isuzu behind. I'm sorry. But if you take 2 cars because you got more stuff, you're just more likely to clog up the roads. And that's going to be a hard sell. I totally get that. But it's going to have to be part of what we talk to people about and having meaningful conversations.
I think at the moment, and if you look at what during the campfire, and they had lots of planning, there just has to be a catastrophic plan for there is not enough time to have staggered evacuations, which is what they had practiced in Paradise. And if it's what we've been experiencing, it is going to happen all at once, and everyone's leaving all at once. And it's not going to be them taking their second car. Everyone is literally going to leave at the same second. So I hope that even though that is going to be the worst case scenario, that there is a plan that if every single person has to leave at the same time, that we're not going to get stuck and people driving through people's lawns like we've seen before. Like, anything can happen these days.
So we are going to maximize the carrying capacity of the road network. You know, contraflow. Both lanes are going north out of the valley, flat out. And no, at each intersection, you can't cut in. You're going to be stopped because everyone's coming out of the south end of the valley. So we're going to maximize it as much as possible. But when these fires erupt in a matter of hours, we don't have the chance to put the public safety team in place to do that meaningfully. You give me 12 hours, I can do that. But if you're talking 2 or 3 hours, we can't evacuate the valley all at once. It's just not possible. It's going to be a real challenge for us. At some point, yes, we may talk about a catastrophic evacuation scenario and a plan and actually conducting a test. Because we're not used to it in California. We don't know how to evacuate very well. We don't know how to drive on the wrong side of the street. I wish I had a better answer for you, but until you give me 4 lanes on Highway 12 each way, I don't know what to do.
Well, I think that's a good point, because I think that if there are improvements that need to be made in light of the reality that we face, I mean, everyone needs to come together and be like, these roads just need to be improved. I don't know what the answer is, but if things continue the way they are, it's perhaps something that needs to be discussed.
Well, we're also hoping to make greater use of safe refuge areas so that people don't have to drive all the way out of the valley. They can go to this shopping center because it's paved or whatever. Try to make better use of what resources we do have.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
So one of the interesting things that I heard, and it just really resonated with me, is that the greatest single indicator of whether or not you survive a disaster is your relationship with your neighbors. And so how are you, is County of Emergency Services, County Emergency Services doing stuff to do public outreach and get communities together so that they know each other? I mean, my mom is a personal close friend that was only saved because her neighbors, she got in their car and they got out.
And that gets directly to our community preparedness. Our goal is to not just educate the community about the hazards we face or what they should do in a disaster event, but actually get them to take action. Get a kit, make a plan for your family, but get connected is really that third step. We really want to increase social cohesion in our communities, our neighborhoods, because as you say, that's what carries the day. It's not going to be government warnings. Most likely it will be someone pounding on the door that carries the message. I hate to say that, but the state of technology in our programs right now, that's where we need to have people in our communities willing to step up, stay engaged with us so they can help their communities in turn. And so to that end, there are a couple developments here. We have invested, and we do have a new community preparedness program manager, Nancy Brown, who's here. And that's going to be her job, as I mentioned earlier, is to not just get information to people who need it about preparedness, but help them build those relationships like COPE or SCOPE in the case of the Sonoma Valley. That's what's going to make all the difference. I'll also mention we're going to be engaging much more on a significant community preparedness outreach program. You're going to hear from the county over the next 2 years. I'll mention on Friday the Board of Supervisors did adopt a budget that allocates an additional $500,000 over 2 years for disaster preparedness and community engagement. It's massive given the fact that the deficits they were facing are so ever present. I'll share with you, we're going to be developing content that's going to allow communities to organize themselves. We're going to be developing and fleshing out community emergency response team training programs, or CERT CERT programs. But mostly we're going to be, again, trying to target the most vulnerable populations. And it's that network, the vulnerable populations especially, that they're weak. They don't engage as often. They're isolated sometimes physically or socially or culturally, language barriers. That's what we have to overcome. So as much as I want people to have a flashlight in their disaster kit, I'd rather have them really have a good, strong relationship with their upstairs neighbor, to be quite honest. If I only had $50, I would just throw block party after block party with my barbecue, because that's what really counts. So.
Are you going to do block parties since you have $14 million?
$14 million. We're right now partnering with the city of Santa Rosa. They're doing that. They have 8 events planned this summer to develop community resiliency at the neighborhood level using a block party model.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. It sounds funny, but I'm not sure. I think that I think that the $50 strategy is actually one of the best ones. Is like have a party, get some food out there, give people a reason to come out and meet each other because there's so little. You know, there's that old myth of the person bringing a pie because you move to the neighborhood just doesn't really happen anymore. And I think that the more that you can build that just through those kind of events would actually be a really good idea in some ways.
I'll make sure Dr. Brown hears that and recruits enough neighborhood barbecue party people to make that happen because we really do need to make a culture of preparedness in the county. It's going to come down to us as individuals empowered by connecting with each other. I know it sounds a little soft for a hardcore bureaucrat like myself, but government little brochures and websites, they're not the answer. It's really each other. That's what's going to carry the day.
And I know we're going to have presentations on this topic again, so we don't have to get it all in today. Not for this moment, but at a later time, I'd like to hear. It sounds like a lot of the plans are for people for the event happening while you're at home. We have a large number of people that come here to work, so if it happened during the day, and they probably get here through various means of transportation. So at a later date, I'd like to hear about what are the plans if it's a daytime start. Curious about that. And then my other thought, I'm just wondering in connection with Councilmember Hundley's comments about our development code and adding additional people to a valley where it sounds like if we all needed to leave at the same time, we could not. So given that if that's the current state is if everybody needs to leave right away because there's an emergency and we can't, it's sort of an interesting thought about adding additional people living here.
Well, I won't step into the political fray, but I don't yet have the answer for can the roads get us all out of here and what time. I don't have a traffic analysis for you on that. What I can tell you is in the heat and confusion of the moment, even the best designed plan will not survive somebody swerving off the road or stalling out or running out of gas. So, yes, we will be back. But catastrophic evacuation planning, it might be next year, I gotta be quite honest. So.
All right. Well, I really enjoyed your presentation. It was very
It's just,
informative.
I think he's got a few more
Oh,
slides.
sorry.
I did want to say, part of our conversation with Caltrans and the striping plan that they'll be doing and the resurfacing, we have talked to them about getting the lights so they can be sequenced, one, to move traffic faster and kind of more efficiently through on Highway 12, but also in the event of an emergency that you could sequence them so that it'd be to help open up and help people move through. So I think there's a variety of reasons to have that technology that doesn't exist on our street lights right now.
And then finally, de-energization. I know the city is especially plugged into this. I know you've got PG&E coming out here this week to practice their response to the need for a reinspection of transmission and distribution lines. I will share with you that the PG&E Wildfire Protection Plan approved by the California Public Utilities Commission does envision a much broader scope of de-energization this year in terms of downing not just distribution lines, the small lines that run through our neighborhoods, but also the transmission lines that carry power to our city, like Sonoma, as well as increasing the frequency of such outages and potentially the duration. Anywhere from 4 hours to 5 days, some cases I've heard longer. We're working on this on two levels, both at the policy level at the California Public Utilities Commission. The Sonoma County is one of 5 local governments that are authorized to file input to the CPUC as it negotiates with PG&E in terms of their responsibilities. We're going into phase 2 after having completed coordination. We feel like we've got enough information from PG&E to respond to events. We need to now address what are their responsibilities to vulnerable populations. Right now, PG&E will notify them the power's going out, and they're done. We believe there may be more room for PG&E to provide or augmented services for those vulnerable populations, charging and cooling centers, for example. And then also the money. This is going to cost all of us a lot of money. We have to ramp up and staff up and put the wheels into motion before the power goes out, or even if it's threatened to go out. We need that time to put people on call, activate emergency operations centers. This is going to run several $100,000s every year, and at least, and that's just direct cost to local government. We're not talking about economic losses at all. So we believe PG&E may have a role there to help us develop better capabilities, especially if we're going to be asked to provide additional services to vulnerable populations. We need to talk about the money. We are going to conduct a revision of our de-energization plan, which we had last year. We're going to expand and increase the operational coordination, especially with stakeholders like the City of Sonoma. We're exercising that plan on July 24th with PG&E. And on August 6th of this year, we're going back to the Board of Supervisors with our revised de-energization plan. So it's a big summer for us.
I just have a question. Thank you so much. That was a lot of information, but I think it's valuable if we remember back what it felt to be isolated and wondering what's going on. That's really a tough time for all of us. With respect to getting out of here, is there data from Transportation Authority or how they run the travel models? Is there anything historically that they were able to pull from the data of where people go in emergencies?
Not for emergencies. We've not looked at a maximum load capacity in traffic modeling for especially evacuation at this point. Traffic modeling is just peak rush hours kind of thing, and we'd have to run a lot of work. We'd have to do quite a bit of work to get that answer. I wish I had that for you today. I'm familiar with it. I've worked on hurricane modeling on the East Coast.
I mean, it's just a great tool, obviously.
Yeah. And it's about $200,000 to do it for a county our size. And yes, I do have a lot of money, but I haven't gotten there yet. So.
Thank you. Maybe PG&E.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
I'm really glad that you're putting some pressure on PG&E to provide cooling and charging stations. That's my largest concern with this, is especially vulnerable populations, considering how many seniors we have. Really hot days, 107 degrees, and no power is death sentence for people, and very literally so. So I'm glad that there's push in that direction for sure from your agency. The other thing is, I think you mentioned it before, but I think it's a really crucial piece. When we talk about leaving the valley, it's about getting to safety, not as much as it is like getting all the way out, but getting to some place where your family's going to be physically safe and prepared. So identifying those locations that are far enough from the fires. I think the high school is a great example of a spot that could be safe. It's a grass field, it's wet between it and any trees and things like that. So I think, when we consider emergency management and evacuations, I'm glad to hear that you guys are considering that option as well. It's just how do we get people out of the hills or wherever the danger is and into a safe location. So I think that's really smart.
Anyone else? Councilmember Cook.
Well, I just want to thank you for your presentation. It looks like we're off to a great beginning. I do think that a lot of things that my colleagues said were true. Community involvement. And I like the neighborhood parties. You were talking about that. Not a block party, but where the neighbors do get along and they do talk. And one thing I did want to say, and one thing I've been telling a lot of people, especially since the fires, I mean, we could have lockdown at schools, we could have earthquakes, floods, depending on all these other things. But it's the volunteers and it's the community stakeholders, kind of like how the volunteer fire department. And as we're seeing the volunteer fire department kind of people aren't joining as they used to, one thing I'd like to see the reach out is to try to tell these individuals, you need to come. You don't have to go into the volunteer fire department model, but we live amongst plumbers, people that in actual emergencies, if within that block of who's there that can help you if the government can't help you for that amount of time. So I commend you. It's a big job. And Nancy, good luck. And I'm sure that there'll be some great things in the future.
And we're very excited. We feel like we may be one of the few counties in California that can actually do something meaningful at this point. As we're struggling with climate change and de-energization and cyber, most counties are on their back, and we're really into this. And I'm really excited because we're also talking with the cities on a regular basis about potentially expanding our coordination more formally as well. So,
Councilmember Hundley.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. It seems very timely. I don't know if it just feels like the season has started early, or
it's always
certainly
early.
looks like it has on the news. So this subject has come up already, even though usually we'd be getting into closer to the fall. So I've already discussed evacuations. It's something I'm concerned about, and it seems to me it would be a worthwhile investment for the traffic analyses, just so we'll know what we're dealing with. But I just also wanted to add to the discussion on the neighborhood connection program that I think that is could be a very fruitful project, and just knowing the communities in the valley and the city, and that not everybody's necessarily connected and overlapping, but it's sort of just once you can infiltrate into like a little hub, people are actually very closely connected. So it's just figuring out how to reach people, particularly people who don't actually really care about government that much. And I just wanted to add that I feel lucky because there's someone that lives on my street that moved in a couple years ago who has been intent on having a neighborhood block party and bringing everyone together. And I feel very lucky because they are pushing it, and it just takes somebody. And so there could be, we've talked about this a little bit with the city, just of our own interest in getting neighborhoods to know each other. Whether it's just us putting grants for some sort of beautification project, or to have a block party, or a neighborhood watch program. And it seems like there's so many other ways in neighborhoods we're trying to get them together, that collaboration to just kind of get it all in at once. And
So that's what Santa Rosa is doing. A little $2,000 grant to a community to run a big block party, bouncy houses, barbecues, meets. Everyone's like, oh, I show up for that. And so we're really excited about that rolling out this summer.
I like that. I don't know about bouncy houses because they're very dangerous, but other than that, I think it's great. But thank you so much.
It's all relative in terms of danger. So yeah.
And just to repeat it, the little NOAA weather alert devices, which I think are amazing. I do think it's going to take some time to get that on people's radar.
Oh, yeah.
I only know it because of growing up, but it only works if people have it.
Again, thank you very much for your presentation. And maybe what is the best way for us to get the information about what they're doing in Santa Rosa? Because that seems like something, assuming it doesn't involve too much staff time, that we could replicate here as
I
well.
could certainly share the point of contact with the city manager.
That'd be great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And now moving on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Questions? Is there any member of the...
It's empty.
Oh, I thought we had to do it waive further reading of the ordinance. We don't have to do that? I think we need it because we're reading an ordinance. Yeah. I had the same thought myself. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on the consent calendar? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Can we have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
A roll call, please.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Yes?
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
And now on to our public hearing, item 5.1, cannabis regulations. This is continued from June 10th, 2019. Consideration, discussion, and possible action to introduce and waive the reading of an ordinance adding Chapter 5.36 to the Sonoma Municipal Code, permitting and regulating commercial cannabis businesses, and finding the ordinance exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15061B3 and California Business and Professions Code section 26055H. And I will turn it over to David Storer, the Planning and Community Service Director.
Thank you, Mayor Harrington. City Council members, at your meeting on June 10th, you have the ability to review the proposals, two ordinances that were before you. One, the regulatory ordinance, and the second being the zoning or development code ordinance of our Title 19 and Title 5, those two particular sections of the municipal code. But we did continue the zoning ordinance development code updates, and we'll be asking you to do that again this evening. But before that, I just want to mention that at your council meeting, you reviewed the 40-odd pages and asked Tim to get on his bike, and he got on his bike. And he was able to deliver basically 24 changes to different sections of the provision that we provided to you, the title that we provided to you. basically got it down to 20 pages. So Tim can answer specifically some of those things that we changed in and out of the Title 5.36 section. And then also tonight we'll ask you to conduct the first reading after you've had a public hearing, and then we'll ask you to continue the item to a date in the future. And I'll turn the time over to Jeff because I think he has some ideas on those particular dates that we'll ask you to continue it to.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor Harrington, I'm going to recommend that the council continue the zoning code item first, as you did at the last meeting. So there's no question that's off the table, and we're not talking about it tonight. We're still waiting some responses from the FPPC. So that would be my first request. The council is to entertain a motion to continue the zoning code section to next meeting and open the public comment to take comment on the continuance only, close that, take action on the continuance, and then move to consideration of the regulatory ordinance.
Okay.
And specifically, we're recommending you would continue to the June 24th meeting.
Okay. Councilmember Hundley?
I would like to make a motion to continue the cannabis zoning ordinance to the meeting on June 24th.
Before you take action, please ask the public for any comments on that issue.
I will, yeah. And just by way of background, Councilmember Harvey lives in an area which may be included in the ordinance, and I live very close to downtown, which is also subject to the zoning ordinance. And so we have written a letter to the FPPC to request advice about whether or not we can participate in making those decisions on the zoning. And we are waiting to hear back from the FPPC on that issue, which is why we'd like to continue this matter. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on continuing the zoning portion of the discussion tonight? Seeing no one, I will close public comment, and we had a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Hundley?
Oh, this is on continuing it to July 24th. Sorry.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
And now we'll return to item A, which is the regulatory ordinance.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be asking you to open the public hearing and receive comment from the public. We did hand out an errata sheet, but I'll defer to that until later on in the presentation. I don't believe we have any other materials to present to you. In the packet, we did provide the sections that were changed, and we bolded those, and we tried our darndest within 3 days, basically, to put that all together into one package. So rather than going through each of those areas that we changed, again, I think there's about 24 of them or so. But the errata sheet was attempting to make a last-minute change, but I'll actually ask you to defer that based on legal counsel's review. So if you can just ignore the errata sheet, I think we'll go as it is for right now.
Okay. So then are we going to have a presentation on the changes, or what was the thought? Or you wanted to know if we had questions?
No, yeah, you just have questions, and then Tim can respond. If you recall, your counsel directed that most of your comments would be deferred to a resolution, and that would be more administrative in nature, and that's what accounted for basically 20 of the 24 changes. Basically, there were very few changes. The changes that we did make did it built into a system of actions of the city manager being appealable to the city council. So you'll see those in there, but mostly it was taking things out, putting them into a provision that will come to your council and your ad hoc subcommittee at a later date. Thank you.
Great. Are there any council questions? See none, I will take it out to the public for public comment on this matter. If you'd like to make a comment, please give your name and your address. Thanks.
Mark Mazzetta, 415 Easton Drive. Today I was down the city and I attempted to get info. A client asked me to get some information for some consulting on this. And to tell you the truth, I went down to the city and all I really got from the city was the agenda, because they told me basically I had to look up all this stuff on the internet, and I'm not really terrific on the internet. And I don't know why there are considerations with regard to something like this, and they don't even have anywhere around here that I saw these changes or even the document. I'm late in coming into this because I noticed that this ordinance was developed, I think, in 2018, and there's been subsequent changes, but I can't get a grasp of it without reviewing all the documents, and I'm just kind of amazed that there isn't anything here for the public, for somebody that wants, unless I'm the only one.
We're not allowed to respond to public comment directly.
What?
We're not allowed to respond to public comment
well,
directly.
it's just a concern of mine, and I just think that there needs to be a little. Well, I think that the council should direct them to have copies of this at the city hall, and not just tell us what go on the website. And that's my comment. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Dave Jefferson, 865 West Napa. And I apologize for jumping the gun earlier.
That's okay.
And I will not repeat myself, but let me indicate that to put things in some sort of perspective, a little over a year ago, the prior constituted city council was adamantly against any kind of commercial cannabis here. Subsequently, things have changed, and you're doing, I think, an exceptional job in reacting to a changed situation, trying to develop rules and zoning and regulations that will work for commercial cannabis within the city. It's so much easier being a critic than a creator. But nonetheless, I thought I would provide some information because we have a property that could possibly be a storefront. And secondly, I've had some extended discussions with a prospective operator. And thirdly, I've followed this development of rules and regulations quite closely. The perception of the storefront operator may well be typical of your other candidates as well. But in effect, in addition to startup business risks, any storefront applicant is required to write a blank check to the city for open-ended legal expenses that may run into millions and for an indefinite period. For a startup business, this is flaunting with potential financial suicide. 1 month ago, the draft Sonoma regulations called for detailed financial projections, proof of guaranteed starting capital, and contractual identification of prospective location. Tonight, the proposed ordinance has removed such reasonable municipal requirements. With an assumed storefront startup budget of $2 million, including tenant improvements, future inventory, and necessary working capital, an operator will need serious capitalization. Yet adequate capital will not be proven in the city, nor identification and location. However, once the city has selected an applicant, they must have a suitable location under contract to apply for and obtain a state license. The selected applicant has 1 year to gain the license, and all applicants must assume the risk of a category being canceled or eliminated at any time each year, and the city permit can be revoked at the end of a 12-month period. And the operator wants to sell their business, they must pay a significant transfer fee. Therefore, please consider these unusual risks, uncertainties, and liabilities that are being placed on a storefront dispensary applicant.
Thank you. Anyone else?
David Eicher, E-I-C-H-A-R, and I think you're doing a great job, very detail-oriented, and I think it's great you're moving a lot of the details to regulations. For one thing, to give more time to flesh them out and think about them, and so they're not too arduous so that someone actually will want to come in. And also to be easier to change than if they're in an ordinance, if something comes up. There are a couple of things. I still think you should allow 2 dispensaries. 1 competition, 2 that distributes the parking, the traffic. I know that's been a concern of various city council plus the planning commission. And also another reason, in case one of them has maybe a fire, flood, something else happens that, or the license is pulled, it goes out of business, then you'd have none again. So that way, I think you should allow 2. And there's still one section, 5.36.050 definitions, the commercial cannabis business permit, where it states, quote, the initial permit and annual renewal of the commercial cannabis, et cetera. And I know you were talking about, you did not necessarily do an annual, but if the definition says annual renewal, does that then say the regulations must have an annual renewal? If that's the case, then you probably want to strike the word annual from that section. Section 5.36.110 C talks about extensions, an extension at most 180 days, and the city manager can grant that. I think the city council should be able to extend that period beyond 180 days for some exceptional condition that's beyond the control of the applicant. Who knows what? A fire with evacuation, again. Something else that happens that applicant cannot meet that time frame because there's so many hoops that has to jump through. There could be delays, and so and we've seen that with use permits. Someone is trying to build an apartment building, however, they need to get various agencies buy-offs and water and this and that, and it just takes time sometimes. And so you need to be able to extend that if it looks like they are pursuing to actually get the use permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that would like to comment on this? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the City Council for discussion and a motion. Councilmember Hundley.
First, I am pleasantly surprised that this is here today. I was hoping for a miracle, and I still didn't think it was going to happen, so thank you so much. I do think that there's probably a little more work that needs to be done, but I understand why the city's moving forward this month to do what we can, and then we're going to have some time to think about the regulations. I would like to have a red line of the last version of the ordinance versus this version, which is not something that we had today. But as far as tonight's purpose is, I am comfortable supporting this ordinance. I think it is getting very close, and I think with a little more time to think about the details, especially as we work through the regulations, I think we're going to end up with a well-designed system that's going to benefit Sonoma. So for tonight's purposes, I'm ready to move forward. But I am, for anyone out there who has additional comments and things, I could see there being some tweaks in the future before we actually implement this thing.
Thank you. And I guess I have a question for the city attorney about the issue that was raised about definitions. Could you respond to that?
Yes. The definition that was discussed by the public member of the public is on page 2 of the ordinance that's before you, section 536050 sub E. It defines a commercial cannabis business permit, the CCBP, which we know from reading this ordinance is sort of the sine qua non of beginning a business in the city of Sonoma. It's the last final act, so it's a very important permit that must be obtained. And it's defined in the second sentence to read as the initial permit and annual renewal of a commercial cannabis business permit is made expressly contingent upon the businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So the concern that was raised was if the regulations change to allow this to be initially a one-year permit, because there was some discussion if maybe it's a one-year renewal for the first 2 or 3 years, and then thereafter it blossoms to maybe a 2-year. To allow that flexibility, there's a suggestion that the word annual be stricken in that definition, so that the regulations would then spell out how long the permit lasts. My only concern is there may be other places in this ordinance where it talks about the CCBP being an annual permit. And if you're going to change it here, then we need to go back and do a little fly specking to find out if we can find where that also is mentioned. My recommendation is let's just leave it alone. As Councilmember Hundley indicated, we're going to probably be coming back to make some changes to the ordinance as the regulations evolve. They will probably require then some changes in the ordinance. At that point, we can make those changes.
Are the changes to an ordinance, are they subject to CEQA or no?
They would be. You'd look at each one to see whether or not they trigger some physical environmental impact.
Okay. Okay. And I, just to follow up on the questions, there was a question about materials being available at City Hall. I don't know if the city manager wants to address that.
So without, typically when folks come forward, we if they come up to the city clerk's office, and we can provide a copy if someone came forward. So I'm not sure the specific of what happened today, but we do, we send folks to the internet, all the links, everything is printable there. And we do outside in the lobby have a copy of the full in the binder. There's always a full copy. But as council knows, it's a balancing act when folks coming in, when you've got an ordinance might be 40, 50 pages, and we don't know how many members of the public are coming. So we don't make copies of ordinances or those things for members of the public to have during the meetings. But we put the communication out ahead of time. And then if someone does come in, we will generally assist them and provide a copy.
Thanks. And I guess we can go in order. Make my comments. This ordinance represents a tremendous amount of staff work, and our consultant, thank you so much. I think you said the words "message received." I really appreciate you getting this done. But just the fine-tooth comb that the Planning Commission, did on this first. And all of the really detailed thought that went into this. Sometimes, we adopt something just looking at the policy, really, and this was a lot of great teamwork, and I think it can be improved. This is a fantastic start, and it was done really quickly, so thank you very much. I intend to vote for this tonight without changes. Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yeah, I just have a quick question, and I think it's my naivete. The 536-110 that was raised, Section C. Under no circumstances may this time period be extended for more than 180 days. I guess my question is, if you've gone through the process with City Council and, been awarded a conditional use permit by City Council, and then you get sued, you don't have a conditional use permit. The clock doesn't start ticking on your 180 days at that time, or does it?
That's a good question, and something that might need to come back per regulations and tweaking of this ordinance. We want to add some language indicating that 180-day period or the 1 year period is told during the pendency of litigation.
Yeah, because I just think that that's the most likely scenario that would befall an ordinance. And then I'll just roll into comments. I'm very happy to be voting for this tonight. I echo the comments made by Mayor Harrington and Councilmember Hundley as well. I think the Planning Commission did an excellent job. I think staff has done a wonderful job with this, bringing this forward in the middle of budget and everything else that they were doing. I appreciate our consultant, Tim, for working so hard on this and getting it done. And I appreciate all the comments that were brought by members of the public, both during our meeting and during the Planning Commission meeting. They were extremely helpful. It really highlighted some things that we may not have caught just on our own, and individual correspondence as well. So I just really appreciate the kind of effort that went into this, and I'm excited to be voting for this tonight for sure.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I would just like to say ditto to Vice Mayor, Vice Mayor Logan Harvey, thank you. And it's really, a lot of work, and I really appreciate Tim's involvement, because I feel as if you speak to just regular people, and I'm really appreciative of that. But I'd like to make a side comment. May not even have anything to do with this. I'd like people to stop saying the seniors are afraid of this. The seniors are the ones that have come to me, other people, and said some of the products that are available are really medically helpful. So I keep hearing about, we're scared. And I want to remind everybody, many of us grew up in the 60s when you could go to a party and there's everything available, no regulations. Nobody even thought of bringing Tim on board. You may not have even been born. You know what? I'm sort of getting annoyed about how frightened these people are. These people are out there and they are using many of the products. In fact, the seniors in this community actually have said they are okay with the delivery into Sonoma. Some of them don't like the idea of dispensaries, some of them do. And I'm going back to one of those scientific surveys. Thank you, Jason from the Sonoma Index Tribune. Actually, more people voted than that last survey or expressed that they did not want a dispensary. I'm not talking huge numbers, but it was more than the people who wanted one. So there are other things that are going on in the city, but I really appreciate all the hard work. It made it really understandable. But I would like you to apologize when you see a senior. Say, I'm sorry, I assumed you were scared to death. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cook?
Well, I won't be supporting this tonight. But I do want to say that I do have respect for my colleagues and the process. And if anybody watches this process as it goes through, I will be involved in it. I am pro-cannabis. I think that there are places that would be great. I don't believe the city of Sonoma is one of them. The 8th Street commercial zone is an area that I believe would be a great place to have it. But with that said, I won't be voting, but I'll be voting no tonight for it. But I do want everybody to know that I am pro-cannabis, and what Councilmember Agrimonti said is very true. There's a lot of misnomers out there talking about fear. The main reason I don't want to see it in the city of Sonoma is traffic. I just believe that if you have a dispensary in the commercial area of Sonoma, you're going to have more gridlock. Out in 8th Street, which is unincorporated, would be the perfect area. You would not have gridlock.
All right, and with that, do we have a comment or a motion? A comment and a motion. Councilmember Hundley.
Comment and a motion. So sometimes when we've been spending some years on an issue, which this one has been going on for at least a couple years in the current conversation, I know for many, many years before then, there's sort of been efforts to get it started and not quite catching on. I remember the first time I brought this up, it was probably 4 years ago under a different city manager, and it was dead in the water as soon as they said it. And I know there's some people who think that Sonoma's been behind the times on this. I think every community, is its own different beast, and Sonoma, I think this year and this conversation, also having the addition of Vice Mayor Harvey, that it has become time, that it is something that the community does want, and it is something that I am excited to see. And I know that it's sort of adding a different kind of requirements to our staff who are going to have to wade through this process for the first time. And I know it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of effort even from this point going forward. But I think it's a great thing for the city. I think it's going to benefit the people that live here. I think it's going to be great for our economy, and it's just something that it's time to do. So with that, I would like to make a motion to waive the first reading and introduce an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sonoma, adding Chapter 5.36 to the Sonoma Municipal Code permitting and regulating commercial cannabis businesses, and finding the ordinance exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15061B3 and California Business and Professions Code Section 26055H.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti?
No.
Councilmember Cook?
No.
Mayor Harrington?
I am delighted to vote yes.
Motion carries 3-2. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And just a reminder, the zoning item was continued to June the 24th. Okay. And now on to our next item. Item 6. Hold on, sorry. 6.2, which is the discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution of the City of Sonoma and successor agency of the former Sonoma Community Development Agency approving the fiscal year 2019-2020 City of Sonoma operating and capital improvement budget, including the establishment of 3 new city general ledger funds, waiving the annual allocation to the Public Art Fund for the fiscal year 1920, approving heritage and community event fee waivers and community fund programming, including the 4th of July, authorizing the city manager or her designee to execute task orders for city engineering services with capital improvement program consultants, and authorizing position allocations for fiscal year 1920. City manager Kathy Capriola, take it away.
Mayor Harrington, I'm assuming we'll go back to 6.1.
Oh,
it's okay.
See, like, I'm trying to use it. I'm trying to use my iPad, which I never use, and this is why.
We're all good. If it's okay with the council, we'll do 6.2 and then we'll go to 6.1.
Okay, I'm 42 years old and I can't use an iPad. There, I said it.
I'm delighted. With the pleasure of the council, will
Both you ladies tonight.
Oh, goodness. All right.
with the pleasure of the council, we can do 6.2 before 6.1. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right.
Oh, my God.
So,
Math.
Budget. That's fine, yeah.
all right. So, as a reminder, this council and most of your management team and a number of staff sat through about 10 days ago a 5-hour meeting where we spent a lot of time looking at this in great detail. I am going to do a broad, quick overview and be happy to answer any questions. So, we are pleased to present the 1920 operating capital improvement budget. It's a total of a $37 million total budget with about 20.4 in general fund and capital improvement and other funds of 16.6 million. We are fortunate that our overall revenues are continuing to be kind of solidly strong, in particular the new TOT and some new park funding. This chart shows what our overall focus is on the general fund and shows our general fund is 20.9 in revenue, 20.4 in expenditures, which means there's about 560,000 that is net to the good or positive that will go into reserves at this point. When we had our June 5th budget session, we got direction on a few things. One, to add $100,000 into assigned reserves so there's funding to look at the urban growth boundary, study and analysis, or other needs that might come through that process. Also, the request for some additional staffing for council support, front receptionist, records management, some kind of support for the city clerk. So there was a 0.75 position that will become a full-time, and then a half-time administrative assistant. And then coming back this fall, we'll come back and talk about the community activities budget. There's some unassigned funding and opportunities that you all wanted to kind of get some community input and then look at. And then also, one of the capital projects in particular, the council wanted to have a kind of additional conversation and a little more outreach before staff went too far, and that's the First Street West Depot Park project, which is a stormwater frontage project there. So just briefly, some of the key things we've got in this budget, some things to help our community are increased funding for code enforcement, continued support for recreation community services, and there's funding to help you all launch your general plan and continue the commercial cannabis work that you mentioned just finished here earlier, and a lot of work on housing and parking. There are a couple of new staff positions to give us some of the workhorses we need to keep up with this council and get some of the work done, including a 50% sustainability coordinator. There's major work happening with our water utility and a lot of capital projects coming your way. One of the great things this budget does is take some new parks funding, and I won't go through this, but we have $118,000 in new Parks Measure M funding and $200,000 from state Prop 68 funding, and we've got some one-time Quimby fees. So we have more money going to reinvest in parks than I think we probably have had since, I would argue, at least 10 years. So some very exciting, and some of these are ongoing. This is just a slide that shows our overall general fund revenue, and again, we are a community that relies on sales tax and transient occupancy tax in particular, and then property tax. And our EMS revenues are another substantial source of our revenue. This next chart just shows the history, and that big increase on the TOT is the voter support of over 70% to increase our TOT tax by 2%. And this does not have the additional 1% booked that council just corrected, but this does show the 2% in overall general fund revenues. Expense summary, as is typical, 50% of the city's general fund goes to police and fire, though in a lot of places that is higher than 65%. So I think we are running quite well and lean with our public safety investment, and then supplies and benefits and services and supplies. This chart shows your reserve policy. We currently have $9 million in reserve. As council knows, some of that sits in what we call our emergency reserve, 1.5 million, and the other 17% is in your operating reserve, 3.3. You're taking about 470,000 of those reserves to do both some one-time, some carry forward, and some special projects. And you've got about 2 million that's assigned in some things, including the general plan, the UGB, Casa Ignacio Farm, some of those things. But there's 1.5 that is unassigned at this point. We had a very robust capital improvement budget, and we walked through those. This chart shows that basically there's about 600,000 in general fund, and there's a total of about 4.3 million overall in capital investments we have planned for this next year. And I would just say for members of the public, all of this document is online. You can go through and look at it. You can look at each of these capital projects. There's a lot more information. 3 kind of time-sensitive projects that staff will be working on is to move forward the Chase Street Bridge replacement so we can do construction on that in fiscal year 21-22, the Friar Creek Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge in 2021, and the Broadway Streetscapes, which we started our community outreach on this last week, so that we can get a striping plan to Caltrans by April 2020. And this is an important opportunity where we can look at potentially what's in the general plan, what does our community want to do, and then, frankly, for a fairly low cost, submit a striping plan, and Caltrans again will review that. They'll decide if they agree, but there are some opportunities. We have a voice in what we want Highway 12 to be striped going through our community. So just want to thank overall the council for your time and input and work. I also want to thank our management team and budget preparation team. It takes a lot of work to put together a budget, and the employees that serve you and serve this community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any council questions?
I just have comments.
We'll do public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council for comments. Councilmember Agrimonti.
Thank you. Today, when Kathy and I sat through the agenda, it was a couple of things stood out, and there are things that I appreciated. When I was looking at the successor agency, we went through some of those at the cemetery endowment fund, and fire and EMS. So the questions, I guess I have some comments. With respect to code enforcement, with respect to the vacation rentals, is there some type of a system that we could institute for reporting back to us how, because it seems like things are slipping. It's nobody's fault. It's just people are smarter, than some of the things that we do. It would be great to know how successful we are. And with the company, I think you've said we've chosen a new company. That would be great to get a more, I don't know, monthly, quarterly, whatever the council would like. Bless you. Thanks. And what I did like was, about the reserves. Thank you. I wanted to let everyone know. We go to these fancy league conferences and they discuss finance. They never, in those courses, ever discuss the reserves. So I think that's something that we should, maybe through the channels going up, let them know that this is really something that's very important because it's a part of our future. The other thing that I really like to see was the tracking, the detailed position allocation listing by department. For me, it's just a snapshot of what we see. For our staff, and I think it looks like it's very easy to work with. The other thing, in every city, fire and police is always the largest budget. People assume that firefighters are making maybe $650,000 a year, but there's a lot that goes into the fire department. It's all of the equipment for the PD. So it would be nice sometime if that could be separated out, and maybe not. It may not be that important. but people need to understand there are huge expenses that go with running a police or a fire department, and it just doesn't go into salaries. Thank you.
All right, who's next? Oh, Councilmember Hundley.
I will be supporting this budget tonight, and I am proud to support our long-standing tradition of having balanced budgets that fulfilled our goals of our city. And I also wanted to point out that not only is our police and fire slightly below average in cost, but I would say above average in service because they're amazing, but also our percentage of our budget that goes to our own employees and benefits. It's my understanding that average is like somewhere between 40 and 15% of public agency budgets. I know there's some clients that I work with where it's they're all in that range. So Sonoma's always erred on the side of too few employees, and I think that I don't take it lightly that we are adding a few partial positions, but I think that we're being smart about it. And you know, the sustainability coordinator is going to free up not only a lot of staff time for additional projects, but also being able to focus on something that is important to a lot of us, and then code enforcement, and then even, you know, help inside City Hall, keeping up with public work requests. I think it's great, so I'm proud to support this budget this year, and I would like to thank our staff and Sue Casey. I know everyone's been working around the clock, and I hope that once this month is over that you don't walk inside City Hall for like at least 7 days.
Councilmember Cook.
I'll keep it simple. I just want to thank staff for all their hard work in this balanced budget, and I'm glad that it came in before the end of the fiscal year, which has been the tradition throughout Sonoma for many years. Had an employee ask me today, why does the council meet so much in June? I said it's because we have a fiscal year that ends on June 30th and have the new beginning at July 1st. So to resonate off of what Councilmember Hundley said, take a little bit of time in July and relax. And I think we only have one meeting in July, correct?
No,
or we have zero.
We canceled it.
So we have zero. So
29th, sorry. Oh, almost.
That'll make a lot of people happy. So thank you. Next year.
Councilmember Harvey.
I'm also proud to be supporting this budget tonight. I think it's awesome to see how much capital improvement we're going to be doing over the next few years, and I thought it was great to see there was a lot of people that came out and commented about the need for bikes and infrastructure and things like that, and it's great to see that we're doing that. So we're anticipating the needs of our citizens and putting it out there, and I think it's a really tight budget that reflects the values of the community really well, and I'm really happy to be voting for it. Very happy to see that Public Works is getting new facilities for the guys there. I think that's really important, and just really impressed with all the work that staff put in. This was a gargantuan task, obviously, and really well done. And thank you so much for all the time and all the hard work that you've put in. I really appreciate it, for sure.
And I am just thinking back, so Kathy's first and the staff's first budget was also my first budget here at the city council, and how many great improvements have been made since that time in terms of fiscal transparency and planning and all of those elements. And I remember at that time the discussion being like, well, this is our first budget, but it's going to only get better and better, which I think it really has. And that's a tremendous amount of work to not only put this budget together, but to create the systems for us to have to be at the level where we need to be for decision making and also for the public. So that's a ever evolving process, which we're involved in, but also, you know, year over year. I just wanted to note, I am very impressed with the changes, and now, especially because we're using the same metrics year over year, it's easier to see where the changes are, whereas there was the changeover from the prior administration. It was kind of hard to see what the true apples to apples were. So I just wanted to note that I am very impressed at the, you know, where we're going, and that it's systematic and not, you know, systematic improvements. And I also think that well, two things. One, a budget is certainly a statement of values, and where we're spending our money here reflects the values of this council. I think that's great. And then two, with regard to it being the fiscal year end, not only related to the budget, the amazing number of things that have been accomplished between January 1 and today are just knock my socks off, and it's so much staff work, and that's part of the reason why we're going to have some additional positions. But thank you very much for all of that work, and it really is a true accomplishment and a lot for all of us to be proud of, and I appreciate all that. It's a good time to take stock, and I will be supporting this budget. So with that, can we have a motion?
I'd like to move to approve a resolution of the City of Sonoma and the successor agency of the former Sonoma Community Development Agency adopting the fiscal year 2019-20 City of Sonoma operating and capital improvement budget, including the establishment of the 3 new city general ledger funds, waiving the annual allocation to the Public Art Fund for the fiscal year 2019-20, approving heritage and the community event fee waivers and community fund programming, including 4th of July, authorizing the city manager or her designee to execute task orders for city engineering services with CIP capital improvement projects, consultants, and authorizing position allocation for fiscal year 2019-20.
Second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
And great.
Great.
And
Thank
with-
you, council, for your support. Appreciate it, and comments.
And with that, maybe we can move back to item 6.1. Discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding the city's current policies and practices with regard to non-discrimination, including approving a resolution affirming a non-discrimination policy and directing staff to add language to city contracts. City Manager Kathy Capriola.
Mayor Harrington, members of the council. So on May 6th, we heard a request from then Mayor Harrington and Vice Mayor Harvey to talk and have a conversation about policies and practices to promote non-discrimination as an organization. And so based on that, staff has done some research and put together a resolution in case you want to take action tonight. We have crafted a non-discrimination policy that we, if council supportive of this, we would place this on the website, and we would refer to this as part of with our contracts, and we would also be crafting some language that would go in our contracts that would then be articulating that we're looking for vendors that would meet this non-discrimination policy. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions of the council.
Are there any council questions? Seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Hundley.
So the strengthening aspect, which maybe you can clarify what the enhancement would be as far as, I think what we were looking at is who Sonoma does business with, or so we're strengthening, just having our parameters about if we're going to do business with somebody, then they can't discriminate on any of the things that we hold dear. And was there any exploration of anything like wider in scope than that? I don't even know what's allowed.
So part of what I guess my goal when I looked at this and thought about what what I think I heard the interest was to, one, be able to make a statement of who we are as an organization. And so that was part of the reason that when I looked at some different cities, and there weren't many of them, I will tell you, there were frankly more private sector that had kind of or colleges, universities that had a broader non-discrimination policy. So I thought this would be a way to kind of meet that interest. And because a lot of the policies and things that are currently in our contracts are about basically you won't discriminate for like ADA issues, or you won't discriminate for employment issues. But some of the broader categories, if you're not hiring an employee, but maybe you're not doing business with someone, that is not really kind of covered with any of our contracts. So the purpose here was to have a broader just non-discrimination policy that we would reference and that we would then, hold within within our contracts, and something that I think we can speak to in terms of values. So In terms of kind of the research that we did and the time we had, that was kind of what I saw and what we're kind of putting forward.
And this might be a question just off the cuff for our city attorney, perhaps, but some people have been asking me what the city's authority is with regards to things like issuing business licenses, and how does that work together? Because I can think of some extreme situations where it seems like the city should be able to deny a license, but then I can also think of why it would be very hard for a city to make that kind of call.
Could I add to that hypothetical? Yeah. So, like, the Supreme Court case about making a wedding cake for a gay couple, that you're allowed to not make the cake because you don't want to, because you're allowed to discriminate against them for if it's an artistic work. Let's say that's the rule. Then can we, as a city, say we wouldn't give you a business license to open a cake shop if you do that?
As the business license provisions of our code are currently structured, the answer is no. It's not regulatory in nature. It's only an income generating process. We don't, frankly, look to whether or not the business we do a summary view of whether or not it's in the right zoning code, if it's a new business, for example, but beyond that, there's very little regulatory oversight that is exercised through our business license ordinance, and that's very, very common throughout the state of California. Most business license ordinances are simply there for income, for generating fees. And if you wish to make it regulatory, then we have an entire another world to look at. It becomes very complicated.
And then, just in the cake example, since that's the most recent one, would you be allowed to treat a business differently? In contracting, we can decide, as I understand it, we can decide to spend our money wherever we want. So on that, we can make our, reasonable rules about who we would spend city money with. But,
correct.
But can somebody operate a business that discriminates if it's allowed?
Yes.
And can we disallow them to operate it?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
That would take significant research to figure out whether we could adopt non-discriminatory practices or policies that would be applied even-handedly to every business in the city of Sonoma.
Okay. Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yeah, it would seem like a Supreme Court decision would make that more difficult, right? Because if it's their right to do that according to federal law, whether or not we agree with that, and I don't, it's
I had the same thought.
Definitely makes it more difficult. Yeah, it's the thing. When I'm looking at this ordinance, kind of the purpose or what we discussed at that time, or the interest, was kind of to see if there's a business that's discriminating against its customers, can the city choose not to partner with it for that reason, or at least have a policy that would disallow us or preclude us from partnering with that. And I don't necessarily see that as a part of this resolution. I see it as us saying that we're not going to discriminate, which I kind of figured we were already in that practice, right? But yeah,
I think this is twofold. It's number one, saying it's a restatement of our values, because obviously this is a local and national question, so I think that's good. And then two, that's nothing new. And then two, just adding some language to contracts which says that our in addition to all the provisions under state and federal law about what you can do with your customers. So the easiest example is, if you do not agree to make wedding cakes for a gay couple because of your religious beliefs, well, then the city certainly isn't going to buy a cake from you. That we're adding. That's the part we're adding. That it's so.
And in your opinion, Jeff, does this resolution basically follow what Amy said?
Yes, I see it being applicable to contractual relationships only.
Okay, cool.
Councilmember Hundley. Okay, well, oh yeah. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment and I'll bring it back for council member comments. Councilmember Hundley.
This is something that I will enthusiastically be supporting, and I would like to thank the vice mayor and the mayor for bringing it up. I think it's always good to review these things and make them stronger as our community evolves. The outstanding question I have in light of current events in Sonoma County has to do with our police force and their ability to contract. And I know that it's a contractual relationship for us. I also know that we will be renegotiating contract going forward. And in light of an issue at the sheriff's level of the sheriff making a contract with a notorious organization that does not allow women to be members, and the kind of backlash that came from that, I would hope that it would be something on the table when we are negotiating with them. And it also, if we were in that position for some reason they wanted us to do parking services, this means that we would not be entering into a contract with them because it would violate our policy. So I think this is a great thing, and I'm going to be supporting it.
Wonderful. Anyone else? Well, I already made my comments really during the question period, but I think this is a good thing for us to be doing, and I'm happy to be doing it. And it's nice to have a council statement about this because I think it's become a pretty big issue in our community. So, anyone else?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be supporting this tonight, and glad we're voting on it. And it's always good to make another statement of values, and yeah, I'm very excited it's going forward.
Can we get a motion? Or
I move.
did you want to make a comment? No.
No. Okay.
Thank you for saying that for me.
There you go.
That's discrimination, Logan.
I move that the city, where do I start? Approve a resolution affirming a non-discrimination policy and directing staff to add language to city contracts.
I will second that.
Can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, now 6.3. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution determining what constitutes the official record minutes of the city council and commissions. And I will turn it over to City Clerk Rebecca Barr.
Mayor and Council, the government code requires that the city clerk keep an accurate record of the proceedings of the legislative body. Commonly they're referred to as minutes. Across the state, this is addressed in different ways, both in the production and the archiving of those. Here in the city of Sonoma, we archive the written minutes. I actually print them on acid-free paper, and then they're stored in bound books that are numbered and labeled, which is part of a requirement of the government code. As far as the videos, what we're currently doing, they're also archived. And prior to the implementation of the Civic Web Portal, they were stored on DVDs. We have records of the videos going back to 2012, and the Planning Commission minutes are also archived, but those are done with Sonoma Valley Community Communications, and they have copies of those meeting videos dating back to 2007. So we do have the meeting videos. Now those are also being stored in the Civic Web Portal and also on YouTube. It is one of my department's projects this year to have all of those all of those videos, the back videos, uploaded to our YouTube channel so that they are accessible and making them available to the public. Currently, right now, we actually have on the city's YouTube channel, we have videos back to January of 2015 of both the Planning Commission and the council. The Planning Commission doesn't go back to 2015, it's just the councils that do. I think Planning Commission started in 2017. Again, we're going to be working to get those up. It's a time-consuming process. In May of 2018, this council adopted a resolution approving a policy regarding the preparation of those minutes. And for all of the city commissions, committees, and the city council itself. The policy said that those meetings that were recorded would have action minutes produced with them, as long as there was the video recording. And then for the bodies that are not being recorded, there would still be summary minutes that would be produced. At this time, we are currently videotaping the City Council and the Planning Commission. We are working to bring on the other commissions. There was some need for new equipment to be able to do that. There also is some question about how that's to be done. I've been working with SVCC on this project, and some of the options that we've come up with in some of the other communities, they'll accomplish this by setting a one camera to a wide shot. It's a dedicated camera, and it captures the meeting. It doesn't have the switching back and forth where it identifies the speaker, that type of thing. It's just a solid static picture. A second option is having someone come and attend the meeting like SVCC does now for both the Planning Commission and the council meetings. The first option, it would cost about $2,500 to do that because you would have to purchase that dedicated camera and then the internal wiring to run the wire to that camera. If you were to go with the second option, it also would require additional funding to cover the additional hours of the staff person from SVCC to do those meetings. Since you guys adopted that policy, there have been some questions raised as to whether the written minutes or the video were the official record of the city. And at your quarterly planning meeting in April, you asked that this be placed on an agenda for consideration. As far as a staff level in the past, both the written meetings and the video have been maintained, but the written minutes are what has been viewed as the official record of the city. In an effort to compare what we're doing to some of the other cities, I did conduct a survey among the City Clerks Association of California. We had 67 cities that responded. Out of that, 64 of them consider the written minutes the official record of the city. 46 prepare written or action minutes, and only 3 of those responded. They considered the video the official record. And then there was 1 city that actually does a combination. That's their official record. It did raise, when this policy was adopted, it did raise some questions for staff because if the action minutes, if it would make it would automatically make both the video and the minutes, the written minutes, the official record, since the policy clearly stated that you couldn't do action minutes without the video. And so there was a question raised for us as well. At this time, we're asking that the council make a determination as to what the official record of the city is going to be. Some of the options that we've identified, again, are the written words, the video recording, or a combination of the two. I do ask that as the council makes this decision, just remember what the purpose of the minutes are. The primary purpose is to memorialize the decisions of the legislative body. They're the legislative history of the city, the actions that you actually take. We also, as staff, would recommend that the written actions be the official record of the city. And the reason for that is because you do see technology changing so fast that the storage media for the videos today may not be usable in 15 to 20 years. So a good example of that is the cassette tape. You have to go to a retro shop or a vintage shop to try and find a cassette. That being said, though, I don't foresee the videos going away. I wouldn't recommend a shortened time of retention for those. They would continue to live on YouTube. YouTube actually is turning out to be a very reliable source for videos. They still have the very first video that was uploaded in 2005 from the creator of YouTube. You can still search it. But there is quite a bit of redundancy as well because we do have it in the Civic Web Portal. We have it on YouTube. SVCC maintains a copy as well. And if that, I would recommend for a retention on the videos no less than 15 years. And again, they're not going to go away because they're on YouTube unless we take that down. And if you determine that you want a combination of the two to be the official record, then we will have to do some additional research on funding and decide what the best means of storing that is. So with that, I have nothing further.
Okay, are there council questions? Take it out to the public comment. Seeing no one, I will close public comment and bring it back to council for council comments. if you don't mind, I will go first. So this issue was first brought up by the Planning Commission, and they had a pretty robust discussion about what the record was, and there was a question, the same question about what the record actually was. I think in terms of other, I think the Planning Commission and the City Council are different than other commissions, and so with regard to the record keeping, I only have, those are the only two bodies that I'm interested in discussing myself, the Planning Commission and the City Council. I think that for me, it is better to have the video and the action minutes as the official record as opposed to just the action minutes because they are so sparse, and it is helpful to have the context. And even on the cheese factory appeal that we have coming up, that is very old. That is 2004, right? And so, and yet we're trying to determine what happened there, and the ability to watch a video might be helpful to at least better understand what the project was before. So I think, given that we have that right in our laps this month, considering would it be better to just look at some action minutes, or would it be better to have action minutes and a video together? It's sort of obvious to me that it would be better to have them together. The reason I would want it to be part of the official record as opposed to sort of a policy is because I think we should invest in preserving those records officially and make it our official practice. If the barrier between having a detailed record is a $2,500 camera, I think we have funds in our budget that could, I don't see that as a barrier towards that. And I think being able to review the discussion is really helpful. I just think it's really helpful. So those are my thoughts about it. And Councilmember Hundley.
Thank you. I support leaving the action minutes as the official record, but having a extended retention policy for videos, and I would even support having something so that when it finally rolls around that something would be destroyed, they would have to revisit the council first so they can decide if they still want to do that. And I think that there's records and there's official records, and for the official record, all that matters is the actions that whoever the body takes is. Like, that's literally all that matters. Now, for informing future decision makers, I do think that context can be helpful. So keeping video records is certainly useful to that, but I don't want to conflate what's official and what we keep because we think it's useful. I do think that our society as a whole is going to have a data crisis one of these days because our data keeps getting bigger, and even though storage is getting cheaper, but then it ages over time, and then you have to deal with problems happening and losing your data and whatever. So I think this is just the cusp of a problem that as a council 5 to 10 years from now is going to have to deal with data. So I say hold on to the videos, but I would do it because we do it as a policy, not because we're calling it the official record, because things that are open to interpretation, that's not really the point. The point is what they actually did.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I do. I think I like everything that you two have said. I agree with the minutes, the way they're done now, and I do like the idea of a backup video, just because it's, whatever. Sometimes it's at a person's discretion, and when they do the minutes. And the thing I'm worried about is the discussion of a camera. We've worked hard to get here where we are now. So if that's going to happen, I would like us, the victims who are always on the videos, to see that used to be, David was talking about this earlier, it used to be somebody's head. And so we've come a long way since then. I think that the hard work that's been done. So before we change anything, I would really like us to be able to review what it might look like.
Councilmember Agrimonti, the Planning Commission and the City Council would still be video recorded by, with Bob here or one of his staff members. That would not change. In talking with Bob as far as the other, where the camera placement would be, it would be on top of the camera on this side so that it would catch a wide angle of the person. We looked at this, that catch the person at the podium as well as the front of everyone's
Well, that sounds
faces.
good. But I'd still like to be able to see what that
Yeah.
might look like.
Yeah,
from
so I think the
an
point,
example.
having implemented a similar process in another city, there's definitely dynamic planning commission, council, where you want to be able to capture staff, individual council members, and you're gonna have a high TLC vendor in the back, you know, here, with Sonoma Valley Community, doing those shots and moving 3 or 4 cameras around. So continuing the investment we currently have. But for example, like Parks and Rec Commission, my last agency, we didn't pay to have a vendor there. Staff could turn on a click, boom, and there was one camera that shot the meeting, so you could observe things. So it was a video that, and then you could go to the action minutes. So that's really what we're talking about for probably CSCC, Culture of Fine Arts, those commissions that are not dealing with, frankly, legal issues, that kind of thing. You can create kind of a different way. So that was the vision, to try to manage costs.
Councilmember Cook?
I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma determining the official record minutes of the City Council and commissions,
What will it be?
the written minutes.
Oh. But is there a
The,
retention policy?
the staff recommendation.
Okay, second.
And this includes retention policy for.
We can add,
The city has a
Oh, it's already in
council
there.
adopted retention policy, retention schedule already. I don't believe video is in it, so it will be added to that.
Okay. So we have to vote on that later? Or give
Actually, the
direction?
council took in the past that it is, well, if you're adding some, yeah, we would bring it back to have that added.
Okay.
Well, the resolution that's in the packet says it's 15 years.
A minimum of 15 years.
But-
We can make that longer.
But is video part of it?
I'm sorry.
Video is part of the current, or it's not?
I don't believe it is.
So we
I
need
don't
to add
believe-
video?
It would just need to be added to the retention
said it's
schedule.
not.
It's in the resolution.
Right, it's in the resolution adding it.
It makes videos retention for 15 years. So the resolution that was just moved, includes the 15-year retention requirement.
Be it further resolved that the retention for the meeting videos is to be a minimum of 15 years.
What?
I just wanted to throw out again, if anyone was interested, to have before a video is deleted, that it have to come back to the council for reconsideration. If anybody's interested in having a provision before it actually, so it's 2012, so this would be 2027 would be the first time the city clerk is in the position to delete a video,
Well,
perhaps.
the only thing that I would say with that is you do have an adopted retention schedule, which because the council has decided that, you know, those are the time periods that are legally required and are what either department preference or council preference. Again, you can make that longer if you like. But if you start taking, I will say this, if you start taking pieces of your retention schedule and your retention guideline and making it come back to be, you know, approved or denied before it can be, you know, in conjunction with, it can be destroyed in conjunction with your retention schedule, you're kind of, you know, going around your own retention schedule.
So currently, the way that works, when there are records that have reached a point where, it's like, say there's a record for 10 years and it's reached the 10 years and it can be destroyed. Those records then get listed on a form and that gets reviewed by the city clerk. It gets typically put together by a management person, department head, and then it gets reviewed by department head, city clerk, city manager, goes to city attorney, and then comes back. That's how things get. That is the proper process for destruction of records. So I think the point the clerk is making, most of that is you set a broad policy and it happens internally. So if we would have to think of a different way, and we can talk about this more when we bring our retention schedule forward, because we'll be doing an update. So I would suggest we kind of just think about, is there another way? I can appreciate for the videos wanting to have, you know, additional concern on that. So I appreciate, but maybe the thing to do at this point is we're not going to be destroying any of them anytime soon. And when we bring an update to the records retention, maybe we can add something in there and think about how to do that.
Okay. So we had a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
No.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to council member reports and comments.
Well, I'm from Zero Waste. We are meeting this Wednesday. We now have our new executive director, Leslie Lukacs. I hope I'm saying her name right. She really, really has a wealth of knowledge, and she's really, well, we're going to be moving forward. I'm so excited about it because with an interim who was a wonderful manager, we still were in a holding pattern because we couldn't institute any of the regulations and any of the things that we wanted to do. And she is especially looking into CRV recycling for the county. And one of the facts that she brought up was that CRV recycling is still continuing along the 101 corridor. So people anywhere around from the 101 corridor don't have the advantage of doing these things. And it's kind of interesting because there are other things within the county that happen along the 101 corridor. So somehow people, our cities sort of get ignored. So those are the things I'm excited about. And of course, just moving ahead with, the different regulations and recognizing how to really recycle. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? No?
Just want to thank the city manager for our new chairs.
Oh. That's true.
I'm not going to use them.
Yeah.
Are the city manager comments?
Yeah, just a few brief reminders of some things coming up. So this Thursday, we have our Housing Town Hall. This will be an interactive, 6 to 9 o'clock, vintage house. There'll be maps, there'll be Lego pieces. You'll be working with your neighbors. I think this is gonna be a lot of fun. So please come on down, welcome everyone. And we're gonna be talking what kind of housing, where do you want it, how high, what type of housing. So I think this is what the community's been asking for. So I think hopefully we'll get a lot of folks. So please come join us. And just to follow up on Chris Godley's conversations about PG&E and the public safety shutoff program, a couple of things. On June 20th of this week, PG&E will be doing a drill. One of them is here in the city, partly county, but they are going to be practicing how do they move forward and turn the electricity back on. So they're going to be working in Sonoma, in the Sonoma Valley. This will be primarily, there'll be helicopters, there'll be lots of PG&E trucks. No electricity is getting shut off. They're just going to be pretend and trying and working through bugs on how they would be turning it back on. So I think it's great to have them practicing here in our own backyard. And then we have 2 sets of meetings that we're doing for information for the community on the public safety power shutoff. One is this Friday, a business outreach meeting. I want to thank the lodge, and then we're co-partnering this with Vintners and Growers, the Chamber, Visitors Bureau, and our local fire department and the chamber to put this on. And then we've got 2 sessions coming next week. There'll be a session from 4 to 5, another one 5 to 6. All this information will be on our website and Facebook. Information's going out. And that will be for members of the community. And Vintage House is helping us hosting that. So trying to encourage seniors to come as well. So lots of opportunities to learn more.
Great, thank you. City Attorney?
Just have a quick report. Number one, Mayor, if you would, adjourn tonight's meeting to June 24th. I'd appreciate that. Also just want to bring to your attention a recent case that came out of the 6th Circuit, which is a federal court that covers the states of Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee, that ruled that chalking tires for purposes of determining whether somebody's violated the parking requirements is a search under the Fourth Amendment, which means it normally would be required to, before you could do it, is to have a warrant issued to support the search. That same court, however, ruled that the search in question was not a violation of the Constitution. It remanded the matter back to the trial court to determine whether or not some of the exceptions that the city was advocating for not having a warrant applied or not, and gave the city another opportunity to come up with some of the more exceptions that exist for warrantless searches. Just a quick note, the Sixth Circuit decision is not binding on any federal court in the Ninth Circuit, where the state of California is located. It is not binding on any state court either. The Sixth Circuit ruled that it was a search because the officer made physical contact with the plaintiff's vehicle and found that that was sufficient to constitute a search. And there are a number of cases that would, I think, find that that's not sufficient. You need some kind of physical intrusion into some constitutionally protected area. For example, if you put a GPS unit under the undercarriage of a car to track its location, the courts have held that to be a search that required a warrant beforehand. Or taking a drug-sniffing dog into a person's home, or the curtilage of the home. And I'm not sure what the curtilage is. It's an old term that I was going to look up before I talked to you about this, and I forgot. That's also considered a physical intrusion requiring a warrant. Doesn't even know what a curtilage is.
It's like you're like, ugh, it's gross now.
Yeah, no, it sounds like something like cottage cheese. Get that sense of. Any rate, there are.
Rebecca's got it. She's looked it up.
It's an area of land attached to a house and forming one enclosure within it.
Oh.
It's like a mud room.
I was way off on
Thank
that.
you.
That
Any rate,
must have
there's-
been a very motivated attorney or who brought that up forward and appealed it.
Yeah. So we're a long ways from that, I think, taking hold in California. The nationwide practice of chalking tires is also an argument that there's sort of an implicit license that the society has actually granted to police and parking officials to chalk your cars. And that's another exception to the warrant requirement of the Fourth Amendment. But just I thought I'd bring that up too. I'll keep you posted if any state cases or the Ninth Circuit rules in a way similar to the Sixth Circuit.
Thank you, and I will adjourn this meeting to the 24th.
Thank you.
This is the meeting announcement for these meetings. This is a business meeting. Can council members attend this?